No-till and minimum-till planters are becoming more frequently seen in fields all over the grain-producing regions in the country. Most of these planters are imported from countries like Argentina, Brazil and the US, but local manufacturers are testing and selling some prototypes. Argentinian farmers prefer to talk about direct planting rather than no-till or zero-till, because that is precisely what they do. They only make a small cut in the soil, just big enough to place the seed. There are big differences between so-called no-till planters that are being used in South Africa. Some manufacturers only make use of coulters to cut through the stubble and place the seed and fertilizer with pressure wheels at the rear to close the furrow. Others use tines to penetrate deeper into the soil in order to loosen the soil. Different methods are also used to plant through thick stubble. Tine rollers remove stubble directly in front of the tine or coulter. The biggest challenge for manufacturers is to ensure that seed is planted at the right depth and that there is good contact between the seed and the soil. The flow of stubble between the planter units is also important, as this should not accumulate in front or in between these units. Where tines or double coulters are used to penetrate deeper into the soil or to mix the soil somewhat, this should no longer be termed no-till or zero-till, but rather minimum-till. This is a 10-row minimum-till planter from John Deere, imported from Brazil. The working parts of the John Deere planter consist of a cutting single coulter in front, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters for seed placement between two depth control wheels, followed by two angled pressure wheels. This is an example of a 4-row Vence Tudo imported Brazilian planter with working parts similar to those of the John Deere planter. This is an 8-row Tatu planter from Brazil, fitted only with coulters for cutting stubble and opening furrows for seed and fertilizer placement. The working parts of a Tatu planter: a single coulter in front to cut through the stubble, followed by double coulters for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters for seed placement with double depth control wheels and pressure wheels at the rear. A narrow row 40 to 50 centimeter Tatu planter with a cutting coulter in front, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by two depth control wheels with a coulter in between for seed placement, followed by two pressure wheels. A 6-row Kuhn Matassa imported planter. The working parts of the Kuhn Matassa planter consist of a single cutting coulter in front, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters at an angle for mixing soil, followed by double coulters for seed placement between two depth control wheels with double pressure wheels at the rear. A 4-row Jumel imported planter. The working parts of the Jumel planter consist of a single cutting coulter in front, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters for seed placement between two depth control wheels with double pressure wheels at the rear. An 11-row Massey Ferguson planter. A twin-row Great Plains planter imported from the US. Twin rows are 30 centimeters apart with a 70 centimeter gap between twin rows for better flow of stubble. Tine rollers are at an angle in front to move stubble to the sides, followed by a ripple coulter for cutting and placement of fertilizer, followed by double coulters for seed placement between depth control wheels with pressure wheels at the rear. The working parts of the Apache planter are as follows. Double cut coulters in front for cutting through stubble and for placing fertilizer. Note that one coulter is a normal smooth coulter while the other is a notch coulter. The double cut coulters are followed by a ripple coulter, followed by double coulters for seed placing between two depth control wheels, followed by double pressure wheels with notches. A DBX planter with a single cutting coulter in front, followed by a tine for deep placement of fertilizer, followed by a single broad rubber wheel for leveling, followed by the seed placement shoe with double off-center pressure wheels at the rear. A locally manufactured minimum till planter called the Equalizer, originally designed for planting wheat. The working parts consist of a single cutting coulter in front, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters for seed placement between double depth control wheels, followed by double rubber pressure wheels at the rear. A minimum till planter built for draft animals for emerging farmers without tractors. The working parts consist of a cutting coulter in front between two cast iron wheels for cutting through stubble, followed by a tine for fertilizer placement, followed by double coulters for seed placement, followed by two pressure wheels at the rear that also act as the driver mechanism for the seed and fertilizer bins.